હા બધું જ છે બે કોલરમાં એક હેન્ડ વાઇટ બધું જ છે हाँ हाँ ओके ओके हाँ वो तो ये भी दो माइक है ये कॉलर भी दो है अच्छा हाँ यस 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 प्रेजेंटेशन इज यस दिस वन सर हाँ यस You want this one? Ah, or this one. हाँ हाँ नंबर है ऊपर हाँ yes sir हाँ ये ओवरहेड बोली जाए पहला શરૂઆતમાં તો વાંધો ન આવે તો આપણે કોઈ તો આપા ઓપરાનો ફાયદા ચાલુ તો આવે તો હું આ ઉપર જઉં સારું તો પહેલી ચિંતા નથી સમજાવ આ ચાલુ છે ને આ
Start and
Okay. You want to say?
no, please.
No.
It's okay. Okay. Good morning and welcome to this morning's plenary session. This talk the plenary is by Professor Ariel Rubinstein, but it's being chaired by Professor Rangarajan. So I'll request Professor Rangarajan to take over and then he's here.
Friends, we are indeed deeply honored and privileged to have with us this morning an outstanding economist, Dr. Ariel Rubinstein. He is a professor of economics in School of Economics at Tel Aviv University, and also a professor of economics in New York University. His contributions to economic theory are immense. He has written in the fields of economic theory, bounded rationality, game theory, and experimental economics and choice theory. In fact, his 1982 article, Perfect Equilibrium in a Bargaining Model, is one of the most fundamental works in the field of bargaining and negotiation. And the model is now known as Rubinstein bargaining model. Dr. Rubinstein has received a number of awards and was elected as a fellow to to a number of societies. In 1985, he was elected as Fellow of the Econometric Society, and he became its president in 2004. If I have to list all his awards and fellowships that he has received, it will be a long one, but suffice it to say this morning, we are indeed really very privileged to have him with us. And one interesting thing is Rubinstein is always breaking new ground. And he has in the lecture that he's going to deliver today, and has talked about new areas. And he actually requests people in the field of economic theory to move away from the existing framework and talk in terms of what changes the existing framework itself needs. So Dr. Rubinstein will speak to us this morning on economics with no prices. I now request him to deliver these lectures.
View.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a delight to be in India, especially here. I will, after the lecture yesterday of Kashik Basu, I feel a little humble. I cannot compete with his way of speech. I'm an economic theoretician, and I know very little about economics in general and the economy of India, or economy of the world in particular. So my talk is what I would call conceptual within the field of economic theory. The work that I'm going to talk about is mainly built on a work that I do with my friend and co-author Michael Richter. Usually when I present a paper with a co-author, I show also his picture. So this is a picture that I took of him. You don't see him, but he is here, and that's of course was taken in our lab. Our lab, of course, in economic theory, a lab means a coffee place. And this particular place is a cafe in east of London, one of the places where we were sitting and working, and created some of the ideas of this project. Let me start. I don't like introductions, but I like to put you into the mood of the paper, okay? So I guess that all of you, from time to time, there is some holiday or some feast, and there is some family dinner. So I would like you to get in the next 2 minutes into the mood of a family dinner. So here is the family dinner. I took the picture from the West, so it's people from the West. Think about a Christmas dinner or Passover dinner or whatever. And believe me, there are 18 guys in this picture. And the beginning of the dinner, there is a main course, and grandma and grandfather who are preparing the meal, just put in front of you. In the Jewish tradition, it will be some half chicken or something like that on the plate, and you have to eat it. You like it, you don't like it, you have to eat it. And you eat it, of course, because you have to eat it. At this point, everything is fine. Nothing is economics. You just have the dictator, namely the grandma or the grandfather, force you to eat the half chicken. But now comes the moment that the grandma spy is coming and changes everything in this story. So grandma comes with the pie. It's a traditional family pie that everybody loves and wants to get as much as possible from the pie. And now she puts it on the table and disappears. And now what happens? First of all, I would like to persuade you that this is a pure economic problem. What is economics about? Economics is about situations where you have a scarce resource, in this case, the pie. There is only one pie. And there is some conflict of interest between the participants in the society, in this case, the family members, because everybody wants to have as much as possible from the pie, and that cannot be achieved. So there is a need to allocation of the pie among the members of the family. And that's exactly the type of what is economics is about. So we are within, it's not about pie, it's not about feasts, it's about economics. Now, what are the traditional ways that this dilemma or this problem is resolved in economic literature? One case is one brand, one approach is with the prices. Namely, there is a market. So probably somebody gets the ownership of the pie and there is some market about, I give you some of the pie and you give me some money or some other resources. And eventually the pie is partitioned among the members of the family. I hope very much that in your family, when grandma comes with the pie, you don't conduct a market. Correct me if I'm wrong. The game theoretical approach would be probably to conduct an auction. Grandmother will declare, here's the pie, and now you will, let's say, you will announce some prices, and I don't know, first, second auction, whatever, and the pie will be divided. Again, I hope very much that your grandma or grandfather do not conduct an auction regarding the pie. So there is economic situation, and it's not resolved neither by markets, by prices, and nor by some game theoretical institutions. And still, as we know, the pie is divided, and things are more or less in most families are in harmony. And the question is, what are the institutions that creates the harmony in situation like that? So we want to suggest something, and something that we suggest, and I think is more or less, there is some grain of truth behind this idea, that there is some, when grandma puts the pie on the table, then people have in mind that I like the pie very much, but I will, let's say again, let me tell you, there are 18 guys here in the family. So, but I will not be, it will be completely forbidden in some, not from legal point of view, but from ethical point of view, if I take 1/4 of the pie. It's not that I don't like the pie. I want the pie as much as possible, but I will not take it, right? It's not done. What is resolving situation like that? There is some norm about what is permissible and what is forbidden. And this norm creates some harmony. So let's say that the norm in this family in the past was because the family was larger in the last few years, but now it's shrinking. So in the past, the people did not take more than 5% of the pie. So everybody takes 5% of the pie, and the outcome is that something is left over. Grandma is not very happy, but it's done. That's possible, right? That's possible that 10% are going to the garbage at the end of the feast. But now, if that's the situation, then the year after, probably people will remember that there was actually something left over, and next year they will probably increase a little bit. The permissible will be to take a little bit more than 5%. Maybe there was the permissible moved too much to high grounds, let's say 10%, and then it's a disaster. If people will believe that the permissible is to take 10% of the pie, and there are 18 guys here, then eventually some of the guys will not be able to fulfill their expectation from this economic situation. And I don't know what will happen, but maybe there will be but clearly there will be some crisis. And we have heard about some families with crises like that. Right? So what will be the outcome? The outcome in this case will be that the year after the permissible will go down. So you see, there is something which is reminding us the idea of prices, moving of the prices until demand equals supply. But in this case, it's not demand and not supply, at least not with prices. It is just with what is with the concept of what is permissible and what is forbidden to be taken. Again, let me emphasize, it's not by police and it's not by the parliament that decide about how much to take. It is some sort of a natural process that I think that sometimes at least exists in the society and creates harmony. And again, the resolution is that there is some notion of permissible and forbidden that is determined, and it determined in order to make the notion that I like to use very often is harmony. It's a big veil, but you understand what I mean. So supply demand is harmony in many respects. Nash equilibrium, in some sense, it's harmony. Here, it's also a sort of harmony. Things are okay. People take 1 divided by 18 of the pie. They are used to do it if the family is always 18 guys, and everything is fine. So it's not that because I don't want more than 1 divided by 18 of the pie that I take it, but it's just not done. It's not done, right? Okay. So that's the basic idea of the paper. The basic idea is to form some sort of a concept. As you see, it's not exactly competitive equilibrium, and it's not exactly, again, something else, which is supposed to capture some institutions that sometimes exist in society and which are supposed to bring harmony in typical economic situations. This is economic theory lecture. I will be a little bit formal. Please ask me questions if I'm not clear during the lecture. Don't be shy to raise the hand. It's very fine. The notions that we are the ground on which we work on is what we call an economy. Now, what is economy? Now, as I say, I will be a bit formal, but don't worry, there is no high mathematics here. So the model of economy consists of the following ingredients. First of all, there is a set of agents, 1 to n. That's like in general equilibrium, like in a game. Now, x is a set of alternatives. In the case of the pie, x was a number, the portion of the pie that I want to grab from the pie. Notice the alternatives are individualistic. This is not social choice. It's like in general equilibrium. I decide about a bundle. In this case, I decide about an alternative in the set X. Everybody can, in principle, choose or pick any action or alternative from the set X. Individuals have preferences over the set X. Now, let me emphasize it. This is like in a market, like in competitive equilibrium model, exchange model. The preferences are on my bundles. It's my own action. I don't care about what you do, what you eat. I care only about the bundles that so there's no externalities in the language in this model. Of course, you can put externalities, but we don't do it. Now, let me also emphasize that makes it immediately not a game. It's not a game because in a game, I care not only about my action, I care also about the outcome, namely the profile of actions taken by everybody. Here, I care only about my action. Now, what is a profile? A profile is a list, what you do, what you do, what you do, what you do. Now comes actually the core of the problem. The core of the problem is that not in principle, everybody takes the best action. And in the set X, let's say the set X is finite, everybody takes the first action. If that's possible, we call it heaven. In heaven, there is no economics. There's no need to economics. but we are not in heaven, fortunately, and there is some constraints, and the constraints are modeled in this concept by the letter F, namely this is the set of profiles which are feasible. Not all profiles are feasible. Let me immediately give you some examples, but before going to the pi story, in the pi story, the set X is formally, it's in the interval 0, 1, with the interpretation that 0.3 means that I take 0.3 of the pi, and the feasibility is that the sum of what the people take should be equal to 1 or less equal to 1. Okay, that's the... Let me give you some more examples about economies that we have in mind. Some of the examples are standard economic, and some of them are not. So first of all, the division. The division is the generalization of the idea of the pie. There is some bundle of K goods, and this bundle has to be divided among the agents. So in this case, this is the standard exchange economics framework, namely the set X is the set of the bundles, and the constraint is the sum of the bundles that we pick has to be equal to the overall bundle. That's a standard economic situation. I like more the other examples, and the next one is my favorite. It's the give and take. The give and take is a situation where you can either contribute to the society or take from the society. So you can choose a number between -1 and 1. 0.5 means I take 0.5 something, 0.5 some unit from the society. -0.6 means that I give 0.6 to the society. The problem is, of course, that some people like to give, some people like to take. And of course, the constraint is that it's impossible to take what other people don't give. So the sum of the numbers has to be equal to 0. That's the give and take economy. The roommate example is a generalization or a variant of the famous Gail Shapley assignment problem. Namely, there is an even number of people, and they have to be assigned into rooms of 2. Or teams of 2. I want to be with you, more than with you, more with you. He wants to be more with you, and more than you, one with you, and so on. Everybody has a preference about the mate. And now what is the constraint? The constraint is that if I choose you, you have to choose me. That's the constraint. The consensus, some political systems, some political environments are such that people feel that they need to be in consensus. It's not important what is consensus, but we need to agree. If we disagree, that's disaster. The society collapses, the country collapses, the party collapses, the university collapses, something is bad happens. So there is a need of consensus. So there is a set of positions, everybody selects a position, everybody has also a preference over the positions to express, but the constraint is that there is a need to consensus. And the final example here is what we call the keep connectivity. Think about it as there is some geographical space, and everybody has to select a place to live, let's say. I want to live in the mountains, you like to live in the valley, and you like to live in the beach, and so on and so on. And the problem is that there is an enemy there, and the enemy may come to attack us. And we need to live close enough so that if it comes, then we will gather together quite quick enough to defeat the enemy. So the constraint is that this distance between every 2 points has to be less equal some distance. So as you see, this is not a typical economic problem that you teach your students or you study. But these are also a type of economic situations that we have in mind to resolve. Now, this is a picture that I am, this is my composition. I'm saying it because, okay, I'll show you in a second why. In any case, what is the standard picture that we have in mind in economics? The standard picture is that there are some guys, in this case 5, and there is some, everybody has to choose a bundle from some budget set. And the constraint is that the sum or the composition of the bundles that people take has to be feasible. Namely, for example, the sum has to be less equal the general endowment which is available. Now, what resolves it usually? What resolves it are the prices. Namely, there are some prices that move and move and move until they settle. They settle in a way that what you choose, the budget set is such that what you choose and you choose and you choose is in harmony. Namely, it achieves the constraint. Who is determining the prices? You remember this guy, the invisible hand, namely, no idea. That's basically the translation. Okay, so that's the picture. The picture that we have, but before actually, this was what I wanted to show you. You remember this picture, this beautiful picture which I drew, and you see this. This was the master here did it in 1957, and it's not Picasso. It's actually me. And look at that. So this is the picture that I drew in 57. This is in 2019. Actually, I drew it. You see, it's basically the same. There is only deterioration in my artistic ability. But one day I found it and I was amazed at the sources of. Okay, now seriously going back to the lecture. So what is the picture that we have in mind, namely Michael and me? We have in mind this picture, namely in the previous picture, the budget set, the set from which people were choosing whatever, and then it was determined by the prices. Here, there is some what we call the permissible set, which everybody can choose from some element from the permissible set. Notice in this picture that you have in mind, the permissible set, your permissible set, and your permissible set is the same. The norm is uniform in the society. We may talk about it later. The other actions, which are not alternatives, which are not in the permissible, of course, are in the forbidden set. Now, the set B is determined with 2 principles. Number one, that it is determined in such a way that the selection of the best actions, I assume that people are fully rational here, so they choose the best action from the permissible set, and the profile of the optimal actions is feasible. That's number one. But that's not the only constraint that we have. The other constraint that we are going to have is that you remember the example with the pie. If, for example, in the story, I'm allowed to take only 5% of the pie, there is leftover. There is leftover, and so the constraint is the permissible set is too tight. The constraints are too tight. There is no need to require that you take only 5%. You can take a little bit more. And here the idea will be the same. The idea here is that what is forbidden and is not necessary will be loosened. Again, you can accept it as a principle in life or not. That's the principle that we, or the ideas that we have, namely that there is the society, the permissible set is determined in a way that optimal choices are feasible, but also if they can be expanded without getting into a clash with the feasibility, they will be expanded. There is some analogy of it also in general equilibrium, but I don't want to get into the exact analogy. It's not so far from the idea of general equilibrium. But in any case, that's the principle that we have here. So there are two forces that are going to operate. Number one, if what is normative, feasible, permissible is not clashing with the feasibility, it's fine. It has to be not clashing with the feasibility. And number two is that if we can relax the constraints without hurting the feasibility, this will be done. Done naturally. Done by whom? By the same guy. Namely, again, the invisible hand, namely, I don't know, some sort of process that moves things into harmony. That's the basic idea. Let me move to the equilibrium concept. So every model in economic theory of this type start with the description of the model, what I've done, and then we move into the principles by which we can move from the beginning to the end of the story. And this is what we call a solution concept or equilibrium concept. And the equilibrium concept that we have here is, again, I already described it. Let me repeat, because I think it's that's actually essential idea of this presentation. The equilibrium is going to be a set, permissible set, and choices of the individuals, such that the choices are optimal, namely everybody chooses the best, or best action, not the best, a best action from the set, and the profile is feasible. And the second force is that it's not possible to extend the set without getting into a clash with feasibility. Let me be formal a little bit. So what is a candidate for equilibrium? Candidate for equilibrium is what we call a configuration. Namely, it's a set Y of which determines what is feasible, what is permissible. So it's a subset of X. The other actions are forbidden, and a profile of action, one for each individual. That's a candidate for equilibrium. And now for describing the equilibrium, we have here two definitions. Number one is what we call a para-Y equilibrium. A para-Y equilibrium is a configuration such that, number one, each action is optimal given the permissible. Number two is that the profile is feasible. That's a para-equilibrium. But the para-equilibrium does not capture the idea of that you can, if you can relax the equilibrium, you are the permissible set or the forbidden set, then you do it, or it's done. And that's the idea of the Y-equilibrium. Y-equilibrium is a para-equilibrium such that for every subset Z, there is no strict subset, superset Z, namely a set Z which is strictly containing the set Y, and some profile such that Z with this profile is a para-equilibrium. Namely, if you extend the permissible, then, and if people indeed are rational, then necessarily they will get into a clash with the feasibility. That's the Y-equilibrium. Any questions here? Please. Yes, please.
I'm just trying to understand the meaning of the concept, para.
So para-equilibrium is auxiliary concept. It's auxiliary concept, which is, it's very useful in the analysis of the situation of the model. And it means that this is, look, every equilibrium, what is equilibrium? Equilibrium is some stability against the forces that operate against, right? So the para-Y equilibrium is immune to the rationality of the individuals, namely everybody has to choose the best. And number two, the choice is, the profile of the choices is feasible.
So which means that is a little bit of perturbation will not change.
Sorry?
The equilibrium is something, a little bit of perturbation from that equilibrium will kind of.
It's not just a perturbation, it is a relaxation of the forbidden, namely extension of what is permissible I will demonstrate it in a second. But extension is impossible. It's impossible in the sense that if you extend, if the society extend the permissible, then the outcome will be a clash with the feasibility.
Okay. So
Let-
which means
let me-
without violating, so
Let me demonstrate it. Everyone saw this will be the best. So here is what is called the housing economy. There are two guys, 1 and 2, and there are 5 houses. And the feasibility is that if you choose an house, I cannot choose the same house. No two people can settle in the same place. Okay. So here are the preferences of 1 and 2, A, B, C, D, E for agent 1, and A, C, B, E, B for agent 2. Let's say that the set Y, the permissible is, it's permitted to settle only in D and E. Agent 1 chooses D, agent 2 chooses E, correct? That's the optimal in DE for 1 and 2. This is feasible? Yes. 1 chooses D, 2 chooses E, there is no clash. That's possible, correct? Therefore, this is a para-Y equilibrium. Namely, in this case, if permissible is DE, then forbidden is ABC. But is it necessary to forbid ABC? No, because if I move from, if I extend the permissible set from CD to AB to BCDE, which is a superset, then still things are fine. 1 chooses B and chooses D. There was no reason to forbid B and C. So this is another para-equilibrium. But now this is also a Y equilibrium. Why? Because you cannot extend the set further. If you extend the set and you say, okay, now everybody can settle wherever he wants, including A, then there will be a clash because A is the temple or the palace in the mountains. Everybody wants to be there, and there is only one palace, and therefore it's better that the society will forbid getting into this. There will be a taboo on settling on the beach or in the palace or whatever. Okay, so that's an example of a Y equilibrium. Sure.
In this case, what my understanding is the order of preference matters.
The
Order of preference.
Of course.
And that dictates the permissible
Yes, of course.
options.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly like
So-
in general equilibrium.
So
In-
my,
exactly like in competitive equilibrium, namely because in competitive equilibrium, why the prices are 7 and 10? Because of the preferences.
so A, B, C, D, and E, in a manner of speaking, are perfect substitutes here?
I don't understand.
I mean, are they perfect substitutes?
You have to choose an house, right?
Yeah, I mean, so
So
they're
you
all
cannot,
very,
you cannot settle in 2 houses.
no,
You can
that's
settle
okay,
only in
but
1 house.
so
and
all
it's
are equally big and I mean like that. I mean, are they perfect substitutes?
they are perfect substitutes. Yes, well,
So that seems to be a premise here. I mean,
so the what?
that seems to be a premise here.
I'm not sure I understand. But let's just, is it clear that this is equilibrium? That's at the moment.
Okay.
Now, let me give you immediately example where there is no equilibrium, Y equilibrium. And the example is this. So if the 2 guys have the same preferences, exactly the same preference, everybody prefer A, B, C, D, E, then this trick or this norm will not work. Because, for example, if we permit now to live in B, C, D, E or any other set, then the 2 guys will make the same choice. So in this case, if everybody has the same preferences about where to stay and they have to not to live in the same place, then the permissible forbidden trick or idea will not work in order to bring harmony. You need something else. You need another institution, like priority, like power or something like that, that will bring harmony. This idea will not. Of what?
Others could become a non, right? So
Can you?
So there's some sort of exclusivity in terms of preferences must be there, right? So,
In this example,
yeah, in this example.
yeah. In this example, again, the housing idea, the housing market economy is economy where you have to select a house, and it's impossible that two people will choose the same house.
Yeah.
That's the constraint.
Okay.
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 Okay. Let me go back to the single pie example. And let me very slowly just demonstrate the equilibrium again. So in this case, I claim in the pi example, if there are n agents, then the equilibrium, the only y equilibrium is that everybody can choose up to 1 divided by n of the pi. That's the only y equilibrium. And here comes the proof. First of all, notice that if this is the permissible, it's permissible to take up to 1 divided by n of the pi, that everybody take 1 divided by n of the pi, and that's fine. So this is a power y equilibrium. Now, is it possible that it will be permissible to take more than 1 divided by n of the pi? No, because if it's permissible that you take any number which is above 1 divided by n of the pi, then everybody will take more than 1 divided by n of the pi, and that's impossible. Therefore, every power y equilibrium must be a subset of the set 0 to 1 divided by n. And therefore, since every power y equilibrium is a subset, then the only largest set is the 0, 1 divided by n. So that's a full formal proof that in this very simple example, there is a unique y equilibrium, which is the very reasonable equilibrium. Now, we don't have so much time, and I know that you are very diversified in your formal reasoning. So let me just say what in principle you can do in this model. As always, you can do two things. You can prove general theorems, and we do have many such propositions in our papers, and we can play with examples. I will prefer in this case, and usually in general, I prefer to look at examples. I think they are more revealing than just to make more proofs. But and so let me jump into this example. There are two pies. Now we call it, Michael and me, we call it the kosher economy. You might know that Orthodox Jews do not eat together milk and meat. So think about it, there is one milk dairy pie and one with meat pie, or you can think about one pie in Ahmedabad and one pie in Tel Aviv, and I cannot eat at the same time here and there, so I have to choose either here or there. So this is not a classical economic model, because a bundle here is not sum of pi 1 and sum of pi 2, because I cannot do both. I have to choose either from here or from here. And okay. So again, how to formalize it? In this case, the set X, what is the set X? The set X is I have to select pi 1 or pi 2, and how much to take from this pi or from this pi. Everybody has a preferences about the pi. I prefer, in general, I prefer pi 1, but of course, if I get a very large pi, a portion of pi 2, I prefer pi 2. So there is some preferences over this space. Now, what equilibrium will determine here? Equilibrium will determine here what is the quota of pi 1 and what is the quota of pi 2 that we may take. And then some people will take this quota and some people will take this quota. And again, in the case of 1 pi, it was very simple, the quota 1 divided by n. In case of 2 pi's, it's more complicated, because it may be that few people like pi 2, and therefore we can allow them to take more of pi 2. And so again, this will depend on the preferences of the individuals, how it will determine. I will know the proof of this case, there is a unique y equilibrium. I will not prove it. It's here. It's not not a very simple proof. But let me just make do with this picture. Every equilibrium would be of this form, namely. Again, there will be some sort of there will be some quota for the green pi and some quota for the gray pi, and now there are some properties. Always in equilibrium, one of the pi will be fully consumed. One of the pi, at least one, maybe both, but one of the pi's always will be fully consumed, like in the case of one pi. But it may be that the equilibrium will not be efficient in the sense that there will be some leftover. It might be some leftover of one of the pi's, but the leftover is relatively small. What does it mean small here? Well, as you see in this picture, the black is the leftover. The leftover cannot be of size more than the quota of the gray pi. Okay. And now why this is the case? This is the case because the situation here might be if everybody who chooses the green pi is preferring 20% of the green pi over 30% of the gray pi, then this will not be equilibrium, because then you can actually extend you can move the 30 to 31 without having any problem, because still the green guys prefer 20 over 30 plus some epsilon. So you can extend it. But it may be the situation is that the green guys are indifferent between the 20 green and 30 gray. And now if you extend a little bit the gray, one of them will jump to the gray. But if he will jump to the gray pi, then there is not enough from the gray pi. So there is a possibility here of inefficiency in the sense of something is left over, but the leftover is relatively small. And the prediction, quote unquote, is very clear here. There is a unique Y equilibrium, which depends, of course, on the preferences. That's the good property of this, of course. Okay. Let me jump to, probably let's talk a little bit. Much of economics is about what we call Euclidean economy. Euclidean economy is that, like in most of general equilibrium, much of game theory, that the set X is not just an abstract set, but it's a set which is a subset of some Euclidean space. Now, once we move to Euclidean space, we are going to make, one more refinement of the equilibrium concept, and that's the following. And the motivation, let me look at this picture. You see the signs? What does it mean? It means that you can drive minimum 45 and maximum 70, and that looks fine, right? There are many highways that you will find something like that, and the idea is that you should not drive too fast, but you should not also drive too slow, because then there will be a huge traffic jam, right? Okay. So nobody is laughing, right? Okay. Now, how about this sign? This sign says that you can drive between 10 to 25 and between 40 and 70 kilometers per hour. You laugh. Good. That's what I want you to do. It sounds Disneyland, right? Yes? It's not, what does it mean? I mean, the guys are crazy. Well, what's the difference? The difference formally is that on the right side, the permissible set is convex. On the left side, it's not. It's not convex. You are allowed 25, you're allowed 40, but you're not allowed 33. Sounds to us very strange. What's nice about human beings, namely about ourselves, is that everything is possible. And actually, this sign on the left, I did find on the web, and this is from Estonia. And apparently, and don't ask me about the physics of driving on the ice, I've never done it, but apparently it's somehow dangerous to drive between 25 and 40, and not too slow and not too fast, and somehow ask the Estonians why this makes sense, but apparently it makes sense. But it makes sense, but it's not very normal, right? So the idea is that when we think about about Euclidean spaces, about permissible in general, we have the idea this is permissible, between is permissible. The forbidden is always on the edges. And that's the reason that when we come to the formal model, we are, in this case, we are extending it to be what we call convex equilibrium. Convex equilibrium is everything that I've said up to now with one additional constraint, that the permissible set should be a convex set. Now, so there are two intuitions for that, and I put attention to it now. I emphasize it because I think that it demonstrates the approach that we take in general to economic theory. We don't, of course, we have to admit that assumption like that is done also for technical reasons, as many of the assumptions in economic theory are done. But I hate this notion of technicality. There should be some sort of substance. We don't do something just because it's mathematically nice. And there are two reasons. So number one is that I've said before that we have the intuition that when we talk about permissible, this is permissible, between is permissible. Number two, also convexity is in Euclidean spaces is also a notion of simplicity. And when we talk about norms, social norms, then we have to take care also of simplicity. Everybody has to understand the norm. The norm has to be simple. If the norm is that you can drive between 10 and 50, then it's relatively simple. If you can drive between 10 and 20 and between 35 and 42 and between 75 and 77, that's much more complicated. And in the paper, we have some proposition which makes more clear in what sense it is it captures the simplicity idea. I have 10 minutes. Okay, so the idea of convex Y-equilibrium will be that everything that what I've said up to now, but with the additional constraint that the permissible set must be always a convex set. Now, again, I will jump on the propositions, but let me just finish with one or two more examples. And again, if you have any questions, please ask. So this is the consensus economy. There is some people have some positions on, let's say, from left to right, as in many countries, but the society needs a consensus. Again, as you know, many societies requires, in some sense, consensus about something, about the political situation. Now, but people have assumption here that people have some preferences, and the preference what is called single peak, namely I have some ideal point, and from this ideal point I go to the right and go to the left, not necessarily symmetrically, but going, you know. So in this case, let's say there are three guys and you see their positions. There is a leftish, there is a center, there is a rightish guy. If there is a consensus, what is this equilibrium here? Equilibrium here will be, for example, this, namely some position that everybody, that's the only thing that is permitted to say. As we know, some societies exactly operate in this way. It's just forbidden to say anything which is not this point. Why this is equilibrium? Because if this is the only permissible thing, then everybody has to say, to choose this position. So that's feasible. Can it be extended? This set cannot be extended, because if it's extended, then there will be some position on the right and some position on the left, and there will not be, the optimal choices will not be one position. That's clear? By the way, here I do use the convexity because it is possible. Let's say that I add also this position, the very, very extreme right, but nobody, let's say, likes this position. So if I add this, then it's maybe that it's fine. But because of convexity, if I add this position and this is permissible, then everything between has to be feasible, and then the optimal choices will not be consensus. So every position between left and right is equilibrium. Is this equilibrium? that says that the only thing that is permitted is to express a view which is to the extreme right, even more right than the more extremist to the right. Well, this will be a para-equilibrium, but it will not be equilibrium, because in this case, there is no reason not to extend the set up to this point. So this simple example, the Y equilibria are either that everybody has to, the only thing that's permitted is to express some view which is between the extreme right and the extreme left, or from extreme right to the right, or the extreme left to the left. These are the only equilibrium. More interesting is probably this example, which is, it's the same story, but this time the permissible set is not that there is no need to consensus, but there is a need for a majority to agree on something. Think about it, that it's some committee. So everybody can express a view, but you need a decision, and decision will be obtained only if a majority of the members agree on something. If not, then the committee, it's like in the Congress in the US now, that they vote and vote and vote until I don't know what will happen, right? So there is a there is a constitutional crisis, right? So there is a need to get an agreement, and the agreement does not require consensus, but it requires a majority. So is it clear? So in this case, actually, the situation is, I think, quite interesting, which is the following. We claim that in this case, there is only two equilibria. And the two equilibria are the symmetric, of course, but one of them will be this one. Namely, what is permissible is it's unlike in the Hotelling model, what people care about is not the outcome, but they care about the positions they express. This is also, if you are familiar with political economy, is closer to the model of Down, which does, it takes into account not only the outcome, but also the position that the politician expresses. We go further. And in this model, what I care about is the positions that I that I express. Okay. I think that it does capture something in some committees, and especially in the legal system. So why this is, first of all, para-equilibrium? This is para-equilibrium because if everything from the median to the left is permitted, then everybody here will choose the M. M, of course, is happy that she can express her ideal point. And these guys also are happy that they can express their ideal point. But now what is the outcome? The outcome of this will be that there will be a majority on the median. So that's equilibrium. That's a para-equilibrium. Is it a Y-equilibrium? Yes, because you cannot expand it. Because if you expand the permissible to the right, then these guys will continue to express their ideal point. And these guys will go to the point which is to the right of the median, and there will not be a majority. So therefore, this is a Y-equilibrium. Are there other Y-equilibria? No, because there cannot be a Y-equilibrium that includes a point to the right of the median and to the left of the median, because of the convexity, if there are 2 points like that, then the median will vote to itself. And then the guys on the right will vote to a position on the right of M. The guys on the left will vote for a position to the left of M, and there is no majority. So therefore, any Y-equilibrium, a para-Y-equilibrium, will be a subset of this set, and therefore the only equilibria will be either this set, this equilibrium, or the symmetric one. By the way, I will wrap. This is a sharp contrast. We said in the title that it's without prices and without games. You see in what sense it's without prices. It's not game. It's not a game. You can treat situation like that also as a game. And the situation where to model the situation as a game, what you have to do is to say the following. I have to choose a position. I care about the position. And if there is no majority, then this is minus infinity. This is the walls. That's the worst outcome that could happen. So this is, you can model it in this way. If you model this way, the Nash equilibria will be huge. There will be the set of Nash equilibria will be huge. In principle, actually, every position, even to the left of the left or the right of the right, could be an outcome of Nash equilibrium. And actually, any selective, n plus 1 divided by 2 guys will choose this position, and the rest will choose the peak is a Nash equilibrium for this in this game. So in another paper, actually, we are comparing our approach with the Nash equilibrium, and this is one of the simple examples that we brought to demonstrate that the outcome is completely different of this approach and the standard Nash equilibrium approach. So I don't want to take much more of your time, and so let me just, so I will skip on the other examples, very interesting examples, but I will skip on them, and let me just conclude. And I don't know, maybe that some of you have heard me in the past, I will just repeat myself. This is my conclusion. And the idea here is a message, and the message is that there is no conclusions. There are no conclusions because of some sort of, and let me finish with that. This is economic theory, and economic theory in the conceptual sense. And I treat a model of economic theory as a story, as a fable, as a picture, if you want. Picture and story. We don't compare ourselves with Chekhov, but think about it. The Chekhov will have a story, and then in the end, it will have a conclusion. Sounds pathetic. I think that to have conclusions from economic theory is equally pathetic. Namely, it's not right or wrong. It's not a history book. It is just a story, and a story is that hopefully you like. If you don't like, it's fine. But of course, I prefer that you like it. But that's all. It's a story, and you can take from it whatever you want, or take nothing. And that's a story. That's all. Therefore, there are no conclusions. Just a story. Thank you.
There's still a few questions we can probably take.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you for the talk.
Well,
Sorry, please.
There's still some time. I can allow a few questions and then wind up.
Thank you for the talk. A question that ran in my mind throughout the talk was, and you referred to it at the end, was how does this allocation compare with either market allocation or auction-based allocation, especially the VCG mechanism? I mean, and from a welfare perspective as well, do we do better with this allocation versus if there were prices somehow, and if there were somehow people were able to trade, what happens then?
In fact, I would like to add to that question. In fact, it was somewhat intriguing when we talk about economics without prices. Are there situations in which prices can intervene, and the same situations in which prices do not intervene? And is there a comparison between the two?
Yeah. So first of all, I need much more time to answer this question.
Yeah.
I need much more time to answer this question. Actually, in some sense,
Just indicate, and then we will.
The picture, this picture, in some sense, can you look at this picture?
Yeah.
So, in some sense, this picture is the answer to your question. There is a nice, I think, a nice relationship between a concept that I'm sure you're very much familiar with, which is the egalitarian equilibrium, competitive equilibrium, and our concept. Namely, in situations which we can compare with the market, like the exchange economy, then our concept is strongly related. It's not the same, but it's strongly related to the egalitarian equilibrium. The egalitarian equilibrium, the idea is that you take the assets, you divide equally between the agents, and then they trade under competitive conditions. But again, we don't have time to explain on that. As I said, there is another paper that we compare this paper, our approach with the more standard game theoretical approaches. We don't have time to discuss it further. If you're interested, I will direct you to the paper.
I have a question here.
Yeah.
Professor.
Yeah.
So if you apply your equilibrium concept to different norms, you will end up with different outcomes.
Mhm.
And so a social benevolent planner could have a preference for a certain norm, keeping Pareto optimality in mind. So
Yes.
would that be a correct
Yes.
understanding?
Yes, I think that your question is very valid. First of all, let me say I skipped on all the propositions, but the propositions in the paper deal exactly, first of all, with the question about the relation between the equilibrium and Pareto efficiency. And this equilibrium is not necessarily Pareto efficient. Actually, we've seen already one example that it's not Pareto efficient, but under some conditions it is. So sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Now, it's true that in many of the cases, there is more than one equilibrium. And the question is how the equilibrium is determined, whether it's by dynamic process or by some planar, I don't know. And of course, if there is multiplicity, then you can think about that the planar has also its preferences regarding the norms. In some sense, one thing that is captured already in this concept is, as I said before, I believe that if there is a planar, then it will try to make the norm as simple as possible. And the convexity is in some sense an expression of this component in these preferences. But you are absolutely right. It could be more equilibria, and then if the equilibria is, or if the permissible set is an outcome of some planar, then like in the competitive equilibrium, if the prices are determined by some authority, then you can think about the question how this about the considerations of the planar. We don't deal with that in this paper. We just think about it as something that is evolved naturally, like prices in competitive equilibrium. But this is a valid question. Let me just say one sentence, which is again, like in your introduction. The basic idea here is just to say the following. We are used to do competitive equilibrium when I was a child. Then general equilibrium was the only thing that we studied. Then game theory came and conquered economics. And actually much of what is done in the last 30, 40 years, including much of my own work, was within game theory. But the point here is not to say that game theory is nonsense or general equilibrium is nonsense, not at all. It's just to say that economics is a collection of many models. And there is, like in literature, there is love stories, and there are war stories, and there are academic stories, and so on and so on. There is different type of models, and I just want to encourage, we want to encourage people not necessarily to work within to say, okay, we must model, especially the young guys, we must model everything as a game. I have heard it in the last 10, 15, 20 years from many young people. We must model it as a game. No, you don't have to model it as a game. You can do whatever you want. You can paint any pictures that you want. Nobody forbid you that. It's true that to be routinic, then it's better to do the things that your supervisor did or your grandfather did, but that's what's nice about our academic life, that we can do whatever we want, and so that's what we want to say, that there are models here which are somehow between game theoretical approaches and some metric or some, but and there could be other. I mean, it is just a story.
Hey,
that there is, say, I mean, game theory or general equilibrium, it starts from, I mean, certain axioms, presumptions, equilibrium, like the Nash equilibrium, other, etc. So you are basically have kind of two major components. One is the feasibility constraint that is everywhere, no matter, because you have to obey the resource constraint. And then you are introducing this, what is permissible and what is not. And that probably, I don't know, I mean, it's coming to the norms or something, right? So in that sense, only these two things, and then you're looking for the equilibrium concept in different scenarios.
Yeah, the feasibility is not new at all. I mean, the feasibility.
Yeah, that
that's
is,
what
that should be
defines-
there by definition in
That's-
economics
that's
everywhere. Yeah,
everything in-
that's right, yeah.
Economics 101.
101, yeah,
The-
exactly.
You talk
Exactly,
about that.
yeah.
That's the beginning. The only thing that we introduce here is the idea of the natural, that there is a process of determining what is done or not done, undone, permissible and
Not
forbidden.
policy, yeah, yeah.
And that's a sort of a norm that is determined. And of course, not always it does not resolve all the problems of the world, unfortunately. But sometimes I can imagine that situations that are resolved just by simple this concept. That's all.
And the preference structure is standard in any other areas, like, preferences are sort of in monotony, convex, etc., right? So
Yes.
that's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank Professor Rubinstein for a very stimulating lecture. He is blazing a new trail, and therefore many questions and many doubts will arise, but we will have to sit down and read his papers very carefully. In fact, there are many people who want to break away from the existing framework in which we analyze problems. Some people question whether economic agents, individuals do any maximization at all. And there are people who want to get away from maximization and move into certain other areas. And then the people are also questioning, the behavioral economists, whether individuals maximize satisfaction or whether firms maximize profits. They want to move away from that. Therefore, there's a lot of thinking going on, and Rubinstein himself in some other place also says about the need to move away from traditional way of looking at things and traditional way of analyzing the problem. But Professor Rubinstein has been talking and has mentioned today a new way of looking at the problem. The question also will arise, how much of the area of activities will be covered by this kind of a problem, and how much will be covered by the traditional pricing a problem. Anyway, let me once again thank you profusely for being. But you can.
So there's a debate now, and we leave for the sessions. Not your laptop, not anything.
No, you can just say, you can just. Can you just delete it?
To talk with you and ask a question.
Sure.
Please, They've all said that after the sessions. Then we'll deal with it.
Yeah, thanks.